Hey folks, Tito Jeff Thitoff here with the Jeff Thitoff Show. Thanks for tuning in. Follow me on Twitter @ThitHappens. Make sure you download the free FanStream Sports app for Apple and Android users. Also go to fanstreamsports.com, the new website. We've got round-the-clock programming all the time coming out. New content, both written, both in audio, video, all of that. Go check us out. Thanks for tuning in again today to the Jeff Thitoff Show. Later on in the show, Craig Calcaterra is going to join me. I'll talk to him. And Craig Calcaterra, by the way, he actually started the baseball blog Hardball Talk. He's written numerous books. He's made a lot of television appearances. He's currently the editor of Cup of Coffee, which is a daily newsletter he puts out. We'll talk to him. If you're a baseball fan, you'll love this conversation. I recorded it, by the way, yesterday. But if you're a baseball fan, you'll love the conversation. If you're not a baseball fan, interesting stuff came out of it. We talked about the current state of baseball, where baseball may be headed. All right. I want to talk about this first. A fan is suing LeBron James he's calling it, and I want to make sure you get the exact phrasing right on this, but he is suing LeBron James for fraud, deception, misrepresentation, and any and all basis of legal recovery. He says LeBron James, this fan, owes him $865.66. This fan, when LeBron came out and said the decision to end all decisions is coming, this guy took it to mean he's going to announce his retirement. A lot of people thought that. He might be saying, this is my last year. They obviously didn't expect it to be a Hennessy thing, but maybe we should have seen that coming. And this guy rushed to buy 2 tickets to a game in March when the Cavaliers are in L.A. to play the Lakers. And the guy bought it because he figured, you know what, this is LeBron's last game against his first team. I want to make sure we're there. So he buys the tickets as soon as it's teased that there's an announcement coming, the decision to end all decisions. And then LeBron comes out and does what he does, where he announces the partnership. He's taking my talents to Hennessy. Lame. Anyway, and so now this guy wants his money back. I don't blame him. I know LA, the Lakers got a spike in season ticket sales when it was first teased about this decision to end all decisions. LeBron did the fans dirty. And I know I've talked to my normal co-host, Jimmy Bell, about this, and I don't know why I did that. Jimmy's not here. Jimmy's usually over here. Anyway, I've talked about it, we can both be right. He says LeBron doesn't have to explain anything to anybody. LeBron's given his life to the game, and he's earned the right to make the decisions like this that he wants to make. And that may be true. I agree LeBron has earned that right. But I just think from a morality standpoint how about that? A morality standpoint, it wasn't the right way to do it. To make fans think this was it. You had to know, someone in his camp had to know that this was going to result in people thinking he's retiring. He's in his 23rd season. He's injured. He's going to miss some time right now. But that's the part that was deceptive. That's the part where, even though I understand LeBron has absolutely every right to make the decision he wants to make on that right there. He can, say I'm making a decision. He can do it again next week if he wants to with a different decision. He can do what he wants to do. I'm just saying, as far as it screws the fans over, some of the fans. Jimmy would say, well, you shouldn't have bought the tickets until he knew for fact what the announcement would be. That may be true. Some fans don't want to wait and get left out in the dark then when that happens. So he's suing LeBron James, though. Again, the total on that was $865.66. We'll see how that plays out. I think the smart PR move for the Lakers would be anybody who bought any ticket from the time it was tweeted out that there was a decision to end all decisions coming. And anytime from that happened until LeBron's actual decision was made public, if you bought any tickets in there, you get refunds. If you want the refunds, have the refunds. You can do that. Now, if you bought it at a secondary market, there's nothing you can do about it there. If you bought it from, a StubHub or something like that, for instance, you could petition, you'd ask them to do it, but nonetheless. But that's where we're at in LeBron James stuff with that. And again, I've been a big LeBron fan. I've admired what he's been able to do on the basketball court, and for as long as he's done it, unprecedented. His biggest misstep was the decision the first time, and where other guys get into trouble off the court quite a bit and have had legal issues and, forced their way off certain teams and whatnot. LeBron, for all the spotlight's been on him, hasn't done that, but this was a poor decision by him. Moving over to hockey. Jackets lost last night in Nashville 2-1 in their season opener. Jet Greaves was in goal. It was a very close game throughout. The Jackets fell behind 1-0, tied it up, had a chance to take a 2-1 lead in the second period when a goal was disallowed. They called goalie interference. They reviewed it in Toronto, came down and said, nope. The original call was a goal. Toronto calls down. They call Toronto or whatever. Toronto calls down and said, nope, that's not a goal. It's goalie it's interference. So they took the goal off. Jackets ended up losing 2-1. Jet Greaves was in goal, and this is the big story. Jet Greaves gave up 2 goals, played very well. And he's had a hot streak lately, going back to last season, where he's not giving up more than 2 goals in a game. And if you don't give up more than 2 goals in a game, you should win most games. The Jackets now play on Saturday in Minnesota against the Wild. No decision's been made yet about who's going to start in goal. But Nashville's a tough place for the Jackets to play. They don't have a good record there against Nashville since they both started playing each other. And so not a complete surprise they lost. 2-1. I'm not big on moral victories, but a 2-1 loss doesn't feel that painful to me. We'll see if the Jackets can pick one up on Saturday when they play the Minnesota Wild. In the NFL last night, Eagles and Giants. Eagles are a 7.5-point favorite coming in, and the Eagles, everyone's like they come off a loss to the Broncos. Their first loss of the season, they're 4-1. But the Eagles' offenses look disjointed. You've heard complaints from the receivers, not getting specifically A.J. Brown not getting the ball enough. They didn't give the ball to Saquon Barkley much in the second half of that game against the Broncos. So their offense has come under fire quite a bit. And in the game against New York on Thursday night, Eagles used that push to score. They got it. They were up 17-14 at one point, and then the Giants scored the last 20 points to win 34-14. The Eagles are still having big-time struggles on offense. They're 4-2, but they're one of the worst 4-2 teams I think that you could have in the league right now. I know that other guys got to get to 4-2. There's no other 4-2 teams in the league, but they're 4-2 right now, but they don't look nearly as dominant as they did last year on their way to the Super Bowl. You've got some bickering again about who's getting the ball. Saquon does not look Saquon might look good, and Saquon looks better than average. Obviously, he's still an elite running back, but there's no way you could possibly duplicate last year's numbers, especially based on the fact he had almost 500 touches last year. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll talk more NFL, but first I want to get to Craig Calcaterra and talk to him again. Longtime baseball writer. He was the one who started the Hardball Talk blog. And again, lots of books he's written, been on TV quite a bit talking about baseball, and currently editor of Cup of Coffee. Let's bring in Craig. All right, welcome back to the Tito Show. I'm Jeff Thitoff. We are now with Craig Calcaterra. The guy's baseball everything. He launched a baseball blog a long time ago, Hardball Talk. I said a long time ago, Craig. I don't mean to insinuate you're old.
Oh, no, I'm old, and it was a long time ago.
Okay. He's written numerous books, countless television appearances, currently editor of Cup of Coffee, and he is a baseball guy. Tell me about the Cup of Coffee newsletter and website and what that is.
Sure, yeah. Cup of Coffee is a daily newsletter primarily about baseball. It comes into your inbox 5 days a week, in season and off season. During the season, I recap the night's action from the night before. Whatever the big news in baseball is going on, I will talk about it, give some opinions about it, maybe make some jokes about it. The whole idea is, hey, everybody's busy, everybody's got a day job, but if you read my newsletter, by the time you finish your first cup of coffee, you're going to know everything you need to know about baseball that day.
Why do you love baseball?
Oh, man, that's a good question. It's just been part of my life since I was just a very little kid. I haven't always been a baseball writer type. I was a lawyer for years and years, and when I was getting burnt out as a lawyer, I was like, wow, I gotta find something I enjoy, something that brings me happiness. And I was like, oh, baseball. So, of course, everybody, I think, when you get a little bit older, reconnects with their baseball fandom. But the thing I think about the game I like is, and I'm not casting any shade on football or basketball or hockey. I've been big fans of all of those sports for most of my life. But baseball has a calmness, a regularity to it, an order to it. There's something about it. It's there every day. It's a cliche to say it, but it's the soundtrack of the summer. You can tune in, you can tune out. It's still there. No one ever gets too amped up about an August game because there's always a game tomorrow, and it just has a rhythm that I like.
So you've been a baseball fan for a long time, obviously, and I know they've had a lot of changes recently with the pitch clock, with the limited numbers of throws, the pickoff attempts, and the bigger bases. Are you one who fought back or fought against that, or do you like those changes?
I take those sorts of changes on a case by case basis. I know there's this tendency for baseball fans to either be traditionalists or to be more like football or basketball people, are like, we must optimize everything. I'm not in really either of those camps. I have a lot of traditionalism to me, but the pitch clock, for example, I was hugely for the pitch clock years and years ago, actually, when people just started talking about it as an idea, because one of the beauties of baseball is that it doesn't have a clock, but a 3.5 hour or sometimes 4 hour game got out of hand. The pacing of the game was getting out of hand, even compared to the way it was in the 80s. So I was a big fan of the pitch clock. I think it's the only thing that Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, has ever done that I actually unequivocally support.
Right.
So that one's fine. The base stealing stuff and the pickoff throws, I'm a little bit, I don't know, on the fence about those. They don't bother me that much. I do think it's sort of devalued the stolen base a little bit, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I think the pace of the game was really creating a huge problem, and they've done a pretty good job of fixing it, so I'm not going to complain.
The good thing about the bases thing and the base stealing is that it will never affect the records. No one's going to get 130. No one's going to get 14, whatever the number was, 1,406, or whatever it was that Ricky Henderson. Like, no matter what, no one's going to get to those. When the whole, what really turned me off for a while for baseball, and why I haven't fully been able to have the same passion about it, was because growing up for me, and for a lot of people, it was about the numbers. It was 61. It was Hank Aaron was a home run champ. Things like that. And so when the steroid era came in, all of a sudden hit 50 homers, not as big of a deal. It was huge when Foster did it in 77 for the Reds. Huge for me, because it was a long time till Fielder did it.
50 home runs used to mean something, yeah.
Yes, and now it's like it happens all the time. I'm not saying the guys now are juicing, but the fact that, Clemens doing what he did, when you get these guys that we believe were juicing, Sosa with multiple 60 home run seasons, whatever it was, all those things, the Bond season of 70, McGuire's season as well, or Bond, 73, McGuire 70. I make sure you get that right. But it destroyed some of the romance for me, because the fact that the numbers didn't mean as much.
I get that. I guess I'll back up a little bit and say I got into baseball writing fully in the early 2000s. I think the first season that I wrote about baseball in a huge amount of ways was 2001, when Barry Bonds did hit 73 home runs. And in my years at NBC and everything, I was really caught up in the steroids, anti-steroids records. I think my legacy as an NBC writer was being sort of unfairly cast as a pro-steroids guy, which I am not a pro-steroids guy, don't get me wrong. Right. But the way I sort of reconciled all of that was because I was really into sabermetrics at its infancy in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And some of the best tools in sabermetrics were ones that normalized eras, right? You have things like, I'm not going to go into math or anything, but like things like OPS plus, or sure, things that could adjust for someone hitting in 2001 versus someone hitting in 1935 and all those things. And what those sorts of numbers sort of showed me is that you can actually compare crazy numbers. And my love of baseball history also showed me that there were a bunch of factors whether it was in the 1910s, 1930s, 1960s, 1980s, that distorted offense or pitching in ways that were just as significant as steroids. Now, there's a moral component there, obviously. Cheating is bad. Sure. Whereas in the past, maybe they changed the ball, or maybe they changed the height of the mound or whatever, or the size of the stadiums or expansion. So there has always been this distorting thing that I think misleads people into thinking that the numbers were somehow purer or more static in the past, when they really weren't. Mickey Mantle hitting 60 and Roger Maris hitting 61 home runs in 1961, whatever that was. Yeah. That was a huge function of expansion. Sure. For the first time, they had expansion in the American League, and it really watered down pitching, and that caused it. You can do some math and figure it out. So I get while that can shake someone's foundation, and when you're a kid and you look on the back of a baseball card and you see these numbers and they seem etched in stone, it could be disorienting. I am okay with that. I watch my friends who are football fans, who they now have, a 17-game season, and how does that compare back when someone was in a 14-game season or a 16-game season? So it can be hard. I found ways around it, though.
Oh, okay. Do you feel confident, nothing's 100%, but do you feel really confident that there's there's mathematics that you can accurately compare, say, Ichiro to Ty Cobb and Barry Bonds to Ted Williams? You feel like it's pretty close on that?
Oh, there are differences between all those players, obviously,
sure.
But there are some pretty rigorous mathematical ways that you don't have to know a lot of math about to be able to at least rationalize the numbers. It's just a matter of big databases. How many guys were hitting? How much above the league average were you? If someone puts up these fantastic numbers, but they were only 25% better than their league average, that means the whole league is hitting higher than everybody. And then you can sort of reduce that accomplishment down and sort of compare it to the past. And then there are sort of some qualitative factors that you could look at. I mean, it's hard to put a number on it, but if I look at something that Ichiro did in 2003 or whatever, and then compare it to what Ty Cobb did, well, I know a few things. I know that pitching is better than it was in 1916. I know that there were no Black or Latino players in baseball when Ty Cobb was doing it. And in my mind, I'm like, Black and Latino players didn't learn how to play baseball really well in 1947. If Ty Cobb was playing against better pitchers and better competition, his numbers wouldn't look as good. So is it perfect? No, absolutely not. But you can tell that someone hitting 424 back in 1909 or whenever that was is maybe a little closer to someone hitting 350 in 2002.
I know we have, as we go forward, like with this year's World Series, recent postseasons, the Dodgers they spent an incredible amount of money. They got smart about the way they deferred the payments, the way they've done that with the deferrals. Very, very genius on their part doing that and getting Ohtani over there. And I know that the Rays have competed with a smaller payroll. I know the Brewers had a great season this year with a smaller payroll. They're still playing. The Reds made the playoffs, and so it's not foolproof that see Steinbrenner, George, that if you spend the most, you're going to win the title. But it feels to me like it's still a very uneven playing field. I don't know. Do you look at it the same way, and do you think there's a way to fix it?
I'll agree it is an uneven playing field. I don't think it's so uneven that it has broken the game or made it unfair, because as we've seen every year, we forget it in the offseason when all the free agents are signing.
Yeah.
But every single season, you see these very high payroll teams completely busting out. I mean, I don't think there aren't many teams. There aren't 5 or 10 teams that have spent more than the Angels have spent over the last 20 years in salaries, and they're just putrid. So there's smart money and there's dumb money, and so money is not the only factor. I also think that you see the Dodgers, for example. They were down to the end on winning their division, despite the fact that back in March, everybody was saying this is a super team that we need to legislate.
Undefeated.
No, you're right. Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So it's not as big a problem as we see it in the off seasons, or as we feel it in the off seasons. But it is a problem, right? I mean, there are limits to how much the Brewers can spend, or the Guardians can spend, or the Reds can spend. I think those limits are much higher than they actually spend. That's probably a different conversation. But as far as fixing it, you got a problem, right? It's like we don't have a salary cap, but at the same time, there are a lot of good reasons not to have a salary cap, in my view, because it ends up basically enriching owners and not really changing the competitive balance. I mean, we've had a hell of a lot more champions in baseball over the last 25 years than we've had in football or basketball, where you get these dynasties that win year after year. Yet for some reason, because there's a salary cap in football and basketball, no one thinks there's a problem. So, you can talk about that forever. I do think that we could do a lot of things, though. We could change the way revenue sharing works, because there's so much money that's kept out of revenue sharing that should be. The Atlanta Braves are a great example. They have a 100-acre development around their stadium that gives them tons and tons and tons of money as an organization, and money is generally no object for the Atlanta Braves, because they have hotels and bars and restaurants and everything that they're drawing from. None of that revenue is subject to revenue sharing. They don't have to share any of that with the league or the other teams,
which is genius.
And, I mean, so you see, like the Tampa Bay Rays this last week, we just saw they got new owners. They're trying to get a new stadium, but the big thing they want is they want a 100-acre plot so they could put malls on it, because that's how you make money now, and none of that is subject to revenue sharing. And yet you can still use that money to spend on players. So there are tons of tweaks on a very inefficient system we have right now. Ultimately, though, smarter team building, I think, is still the best way to do it. Not in the Moneyball A's or the Rays example necessarily,
Right.
because those are extreme. But look at the Brewers. The Brewers could spend a lot more than they do, even though they're in a really small market. They just spend really smart. They've got really smart guys making their decisions, that they have for about the last 10 years, and they haven't had a lot of dead money. They haven't had to worry about players who can't contribute but hold up a roster spot. So there are a lot of ways to win, even if you don't have Dodgers money.
Yeah, that's very true, and that's what's interesting about it. Yeah, you're right. The offseason, I never thought about it that way. But you're right. Usually, we talk about it in the offseason when the Dodgers make a big signing, or the Yankees or Red Sox make a big signing, and wasn't anybody like me being a Reds fan. It was nobody the Reds were even in on. There's no way in hell the Reds had a chance at Ohtani or had a chance, when Mookie, those guys. No way the Reds had a chance at those at most of the Japanese pitchers that came over and things like that. But yeah, you come across as, oh wow, the Dodgers outspent everybody. Well, they had the money to do it, and it might end up being overspend in some places.
Oh yeah, it's going to be. And you talked about their deferred contract. I mean, they're even overspending for themselves despite their massive revenues, and that's why they're deferring all this money. That's all going to come due in some way or another. It might not hamstring them the way it would a salary cap team, but it's going to come due. They're going to be paying Max Muncy and Will Smith and all these guys tons of money. They're going to be paying Shohei Ohtani money when he is no longer a superior player. It's going to come due. And your point, I think, is, yeah, in the offseason, we get mad when someone signs a big dude, but let's look at like Cleveland this year, right? Their offense is terrible. They almost a playoff team, solid core, but they definitely need to improve their offense. Okay, so let's look. There's Kyle Tucker is going to be a free agent. Cody Bellinger is going to be a free agent. Kyle Schwarber is going to be a free agent. They are not going to go near any of those guys. You're going to hear reports about, we kicked the tires and talked to their agent, but they're not interested in signing contracts at market rates. And if you're a Cleveland Guardians fan, right, and you see Kyle Schwarber sign with the Yankees or re-sign with the Phillies, I guarantee you're going to be mad and you're going to say, it's unfair. Talk to your GM, man. That guy is not interested in signing those dudes. That ownership is not interested in paying anywhere close to market rates. If you adjust the Guardians payroll or the Reds payroll or any number of teams, the Twins are another great example, for inflation, they're spending less money now than they did in the 80s and the 90s. And they have more money to spend than they do. They just don't want to. So I think we get really lost in the weeds when we see a big free agent signing and get real mad. It's understandable. But keep in mind, your GM is not interested in playing in that pool.
I go back to, as a baseball fan. I was born in '71. I really became a baseball fan in the late '70s, and but I love the history of baseball. And I went back the other day and was reading about the very first free agent re-entry draft in 1976, when you could get drafted by up to 12 teams, and if you were drafted by more than three or more teams, those are the only teams you can negotiate with. And if you're drafted by two or fewer, you can negotiate with anybody. But like Gene Tennis was drafted by 12 teams. People thought he was signable. That's when Bill Campbell signed a huge deal with Boston. And Reggie, that's when he got to the Yankees and whatnot. And I remember reading that my two-time champion, Cincinnati Reds, chose not to participate in the draft. And it reminds me of like with Dabo Sweeney not doing transfer portal in college football. It's kind of the same thing for me. Like you're choosing not to take advantage of this thing that everyone else is going to use. And the Reds refused to get into it. And so that's fascinating to me that all those great players were out there that the Reds could have negotiated with, and they chose to draft nobody.
Yeah, that was a huge thing in the mid-'70s when free agency came on. Is like there were just some ownership groups that were like, we're not going to take any part of it. And there were others like the Yankees, for example, that were like, we're going to be all in. And it sort of changed the game. And the common denominator there is you have a system in place. Okay, maybe it's not a perfect system, but all the other teams are operating by the same rules that you are. You can choose to compete or choose not to compete. The Cincinnati Reds could have had a dynasty that lasted well into the 80s if they had, reloaded on the fly via free agency and smart trades and stuff. But they were still locked in a 1960s mindset of we got to keep this core together until it dies. And, that's why they died. So it's the same thing now. You can compete in the world you're in now, or you can just sort of like shake your fist at the gods and say, why can't we be like the Dodgers? And you know what? At the end of the day, no one cares. Flags fly forever and all that stuff.
Sure. Is it better for baseball that the Yankees are still in content, like in the playoffs still, or out of the playoffs now?
Oh, I think it's always better when the Yankees are eliminated. I mean, I'm a little partisan on that, but I've never been a fan of the Yankees. I've
Right.
lived in Ohio way too long to care about the Yankees. I think it's better when there are new teams. That people will talk about, oh, the TV ratings aren't as
Right.
good or whatever. I don't care. They don't pay me for TV ratings. You
Right.
and I
Yeah.
don't get any money for higher ratings. But I think it's a way better story if, say, the Seattle Mariners, who have never been in the World Series,
Right.
and or the Toronto Blue Jays, who haven't been in for like over 30 years, or the Brewers, who have never won one and haven't been there for over 40 years. I think it's a way better story for teams like that to advance. And seeing the Yankees get beat by the Blue Jays is a good thing for baseball, even though it's a bad thing for New York Yankees fans.
I love the fact that we might have two 1977 expansion teams playing for a chance to the World Series. The Blue Jays and Mariners were so bad when they first got in the league. It designed that way because of the expansion. I mean, Bob Baylor was the best player for Toronto back then, but like
Bump Wills, I remember that guy.
you're right, Bump Wills, Maury's son, Maury Will's son, yes, for the Mariners, and like Julio Cruz and those guys. But so. It'll be a neat story if that happens, if those teams are playing it, because there'll be all kinds of flashbacks into their first season. They'll bring in all kinds of players that played in those first couple of years and bring them on to talk to them about what it means and things like that to be in that. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Is there a World Series you're rooting for?
Well, I have like a personal bias reason. I originally was from Michigan. I was a Tigers fan when I was a kid. For a lot of reasons, I stopped being a Tigers fan for a long time. My wife, though, is a Tigers fan. We're back to it. My father-in-law just passed away, was a big Tigers fan. So, for a bunch of sentimental reasons, I wouldn't mind seeing the Tigers make it. I don't think they will.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to see that. But short of that, I would love to see a Mariners-Brewers World Series. No one else wants to see that outside of Seattle and Milwaukee. I know they're probably two of the lowest-rated TV teams possible. But the thing about baseball versus, say, football is people will follow the national story in football no matter what happens, right? It's like people watch the Super Bowl even if their team isn't. People watch the playoffs. Baseball has still a very old model of fandom where when your team is gone, you tend to tune out. Mm-hmm. And the ratings bear this out. Everything's always borne that out. And by the time you get to the World Series, it's usually the fans of the two teams or people that care about the story that's happening who are watching it. We had the Yankees and the Dodgers last year. Huge ratings, relatively speaking, because there are a lot of people in LA and New York, but no one outside of those markets cared that much. Many of us were sick of those teams.
Sure.
And I think it's better for the sport to have new blood, to have new storylines. I think, the world should know more about Cal Raleigh. The world should know more about Jackson Chourio and those guys. And I think it's better for the sport, even though there'll be these stories that come out about lowest rated World Series game 2 ever.
He is the writer and editor at cupofcoffee.com, or Cup of Coffee, I'm sorry. Is it cupofcoffee.com? I get that right?
I think the URL is cupofcoffeenews.com, but if you just search Cup of Coffee Newsletter, you'll find me.
You'll find him there. Craig, I appreciate the time, bud. Let's do this again soon. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much.
All right, that was great stuff. Craig Calcaterra. I love talking to him. I'll have him on again, but the guy knows his baseball. I consider myself, I was going to say a baseball historian, but baseball historian, that sounds pretentious because I'm not. I don't even pretend. It sounds very like I'm qualified for that. I'm not. I am a fan of the history of baseball. Let's put it that way. So we'll have Craig on again, though, soon. Other news right now that I want to get into, that Giants game against the Eagles. You saw Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo have great games. Jackson Dart ran for one, threw for one. Skattebo scored 3 touchdowns in the game. And I started to wonder about this. The Giants and their coaching staff, their administration, let's put it that way, their front office, they looked like idiots, for lack of a better word, the way they handled Daniel Jones. He was bad at first, then had a good season. They give him a big contract and then reverts again. And now he goes somewhere else. He's having a great year in Indianapolis. After spending some time in Minnesota, now he's in Indy and having one of the best seasons among all quarterbacks right now for the Indianapolis Colts. So they look bad for that. The way they handled the Saquon Barkley situation, they looked inept for that one just because it was all on Hard Knocks. If we hadn't known the way it was handled, then via Hard Knocks, then we wouldn't have maybe not necessarily the same opinion, but just the way it unfolded. Then they signed Russell Wilson with the hopes to start him for most, if not the entire year. And it was a modest contract, but there was always a thought that they would probably grab a quarterback and Wilson be a bridge. They'll sign Jameis Winston. And then their second first-round pick, they move back up into the draft, and they take Jackson Dart. Surprising, but it's worked out great for him. Dart looks fantastic. He has added some energy to that Giants offense that they normally would not have had. Also, Cam Skattebo, fourth-round pick. And Skattebo's looked really good as well. So when you have those two guys on rookie deals, and one on a fourth-round rookie deal, but they're on rookie deals, and if they can prove to be effective, if they can keep on progressing and growing as players and getting better as they're going, the Giants are going to be a force because, like I said, they're cheap guys. The more great players or better than average players, the more better than average players you can get on cheap contracts, that allows you to swing for the fences other places. And the Giants are in a position right now, as long as they can continue to develop Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo. And it feels weird that after what happened with Daniel Jones, that we are looking, hey, but if this one works out, because the Giants did not handle Daniel Jones well. Either they overpaid him or they couldn't develop him, one or the other. But if they can do this with Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo, and then I started looking, and look, I'm going to say this, it's revisionist history. I totally get it. But I want you to know that the Cleveland Browns could have had both those guys. Now, I know the second pick would have been too high to take him. The fourth pick, too high to take Jackson Dart. But the Browns could have traded back up into the first round and grabbed Jackson Dart. They could have done it ahead of the Giants. They had the assets, obviously, because they had 2 first-round picks in next year's draft because they made the trade with Jacksonville. They could have come back up and done it. And then Skattebo went in the fourth round. Now, the Browns are not, it's not like they're poor running back because Quinshon Judkins has been great. So it might be a moot point anyway. But think if you could have Skattebo and Jackson Dart on the Browns, what kind of a jolt that could be for the team potentially, or to end their careers, one or the other. Who knows with the Cleveland Browns what would happen there? The Browns play speaking of the Browns, they've got the Steelers this weekend in Pittsburgh. Dillon Gabriel making a second start, the rookie for the Cleveland Browns. And they also announced Shedeur Sanders is going to be the backup. There was talk that maybe Bailey Zappi would be elevated from the practice squad to be the second-string quarterback. Not the case. Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, that it's going to be Shedeur Sanders, number 2. That means if anything happens to Dillon Gabriel, or if the game gets out of hand, you might see Shedeur Sanders in the game. I read an interesting article today on The Athletic where it was suggested that the Browns should cut Sanders sooner rather than later, or trade him and recoup a 5th or 6th round pick. The 5th round pick is what they used on Sanders, but maybe try to trade Sanders for a 5th or 6th round pick if they can do it, with the thought being that, a lot of late quarterbacks, late round drafted quarterbacks are cut. Kyle McCord was a 6th round pick by the Eagles. He was cut and then added back to the practice squad. If you cut him, if they cut Sanders and he gets back on the practice squad, that's fine. But another team then could raid the practice squad to get him if they wanted to. And I think that's what the Browns' fear is. The Browns are probably a little bit gun shy when you look at quarterbacks they've given up on in the past that went on to do other things. Baker Mayfield, I guess what I'm really talking about here. But Baker Mayfield, there was somebody who they obviously got rid of, and he went somewhere else, and it's biting him in the ass because every time we see Baker Mayfield do anything, we're reminded. If the Browns quarterback does poorly, we're reminded of the fact that they had Baker Mayfield. But I'm not convinced that Baker Mayfield would be Baker Mayfield had he stayed in Cleveland, just like I'm not convinced Patrick Mahomes, if the Browns had drafted him, or Josh Allen, if the Browns had drafted him, if they would have developed into the quarterbacks they are. It's just interesting to me that Skattebo and Jackson Dart were both available at times when the Browns were picking. And again, Quinshon Judkins has been great. Who knows what maybe Dillon Gabriel ended up being a great quarterback. But the Browns, though, now have Sanders as a number 2. And he also, getting back to it, the writer also saying that they should cut him just because it's a distraction having him there. Now, I personally think that Shedeur, the whole lip syncing thing he did when he was asked about Sanders, about Gabriel being the starting quarterback, I thought that was immature. But I do think, though, the Browns, before making any decision like that, need to see Shedeur Sanders in action in a game. Look at it this way. If they get him into a game and he looks really good, then you don't worry about cutting him or trading him. Just keep developing him. If he gets in a game and looks bad, looks way overmatched, well, then you can cut him. And no one's going to jump on the practice squad after they see if he was that bad. So the smart thing to do for the Browns is play Gabriel. Yes. Also play Sanders. Get them some equal time in there and see which one, if either of them, could be a franchise quarterback for the Cleveland Browns or potential to do that going forward. Green Bay plays Cincinnati this week at Green Bay. The Bengals have got Joe Flacco now. He's going to start a quarterback. Might mean good things for the weapons in Cincinnati. Might mean good things for their offense. Chase Brown's been way underwhelming. And Jake Browning looked lost back there. 8 interceptions. Could not figure out a way to get the ball to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins consistently. Flacco will have fewer turnovers. He also might get hit more, though. He is less mobile, breaking news, than Jake Browning. So the Bengals now have Joe Flacco back there. We'll see how he does against Green Bay. But it's if the Packers can apply pressure onto him, it's going to be a long day for Joe Flacco and for the Cincinnati Bengals. But the Packers have a good pass rush, and there's a lot of people talking about Joe Flacco. He could become the first player since like 1962, I believe it is, to beat the same team in the same season twice while playing for different teams, because Flacco had just done it with the Browns a few weeks ago. And my answer to that is there's no way in hell it's happening, because, to paraphrase Rick Pitino, the Cleveland Browns defense is not walking through that door. The Bengals defense is putrid. The Packers put up a lot of points. It's a 14.5-point spread. I don't think that's enough. I think the Packers could win this game by 20. I think it's a blowout. And I don't know if Flacco, we'll see how many hits Flacco takes, because the Bengals offensive line is terrible. Now, if they can get some quick passes out and get going early and maybe try to beat the pressure by getting rid of the ball sooner, maybe to Chase Brown out of the backfield, that'd be great. Chase Brown's averaging like 35 rushing yards a game or some crazy low number. But I do expect the Packers to win that one rather easily. All right, that's it for the Jeff Thitoff Show. Thank you to Craig Calcaterra for joining me. Thank you to all for tuning in. Make sure you download that free FanStream Sports app for Apple and Android users. Also, go to the FanStreamSports.com website. Check that out. Great content on there. And follow me on Twitter @ThatHappens. We'll talk again soon, folks. Have a great weekend.